Great to have you all with us. Thanks very much for joining Zingtrain for another webinar special. We are here to talk about servant leadership. Today's webinar is how to be an effective servant leader. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Katie Alexander. I am the community builder here at Zingtrain, and I also am the host of most webinars, including today's. I am alongside Arianna Téllez León. She is one of our trainers, and she will be today's presenter about this topic. We also have Mara Ferguson, our keynote liaison behind the scenes, monitoring the chat and questions with me during our time together. We are all coming to you live from Zingtrain in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we love knowing where everyone is joining us from today. So please feel free to drop your location into the chat. The chat button is at the bottom of your screen, and you may catch wind of some neighbors, so you can be sure to say hi. Before I turn things over to Arianna, I have 3 helpful tips to help us make the most of our time together. 1, Arianna will be sharing here for a bit with us, and then we'll open things up for Q&A. So please put any questions that you have throughout this time before we get to Q&A into that Q&A section of Zoom. Again, a button on the bottom of your screen. And we'll be collecting them throughout the webinar, Mara and I, and I'll pop back in and we'll do our best to get as many answered as we are able to during this hour together. If we're not able to get to the question, you can look for resources in our follow-up email that you will receive by Monday. Second, there is closed captioning available for today's presentation. And if you'd like to turn that on, Mara has, I see, just dropped that into the chat. And it's the final button at the bottom of the Zoom screen that I will reference. The last item of business is that we are recording this conversation, and we'll send out the recording and the slides that Arianna will share by Monday in that follow-up email. And it will also live on our website, zingtrain.com, alongside many, many other free resources that we have there, including past webinars. So that is all for me, and I will see you again for the Q&A. Thanks, Arianna.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Mara. I'm really excited to get to share with you today. We're going to talk about how to be an effective servant leader. So my name is Arianna. I've been working at Zingerman since 2012, and I can say with a lot of certainty that Zingerman's has absolutely changed my perspective on leadership and the positive effects that a business or organization can have on the people who work in it, who work with it, and the community. Leadership is not something that I was taught before Zingerman's, but like many of you probably, I certainly had some folks demonstrate for me what being an ineffective leader looked like, and then others who demonstrated what an effective leader looked like. And so I kind of thought about like, well, I definitely don't want to do that like that person, and maybe I want to do this like this person, but it had never been really defined or clearly explained to me what the expectations are. Here at Zingerman's, leadership is very intentional. We have classes, we have tools and resources, we have many systems, and more importantly than that, we have other leaders who can help us, offer support, point us in the direction so that we can all work within this philosophy of what leadership looks like at Zingerman. So today, that's what I'm going to share with you. That philosophy that supports our leadership mindset, and it is clearly defined so that it's repeatable for all of those of us who are leaders, but also so that it's teachable. And we'll get into why that's so important, that I as a leader am not just expected to lead, but to teach others as well. And I was really excited to see there was a little questionnaire with this webinar, and many of you wrote in that you are here to be able to better teach servant leadership, to better set those expectations. And that is really thrilling. I know that all of you will be listening in for key points and action steps that you can use. And that's what we're going to give you. Wherever you are, whatever your role is, if you're learning this for yourself or to teach others, I want you to take a moment to think very intentionally about leadership. What exactly is a leader? There are tons of definitions. For the purposes of this webinar, you saw at the top that we have our effective leadership to define it from ineffective leadership. I'm not going to go into what ineffective leadership looks like because I'm sure that's seared into your brain just as much as it's seared into mine. There are many bad examples of leaders. But effective leadership, when we ask this question in many of our trainings, folks will say words like empathetic, motivating, they drive change, they inspire, they're dreamers of a better world, they're trustworthy, and they also trust others. They're planners, they're visionaries, they're strategic thinkers, all of these different words that make for an effective leader. We also have informal versus formal leaders. So you may fit into both of those buckets or just one. A formal leader, of course, is a CEO or a manager, but an informal leader might be that staff person who worked here for 30 years and they are a frontline staff person, don't necessarily have a title, but wow, are they welcoming and do they lead when the new folks come in? Or maybe you think about that brand new person who just started on your team and right away they're giving leadership energy, that when they walk in, they're sharing their positive energy and they motivate or inspire the whole office or maybe their shift every time they come in. Then there's power-centric leaders. So power-centric leaders, they are the folks who hold a lot of power and use it directly. There are also on the other side of that, empowering leaders who are not using their authority as loudly, but bringing others in. Mary Parker Foley is she's called the mother of modern management. And here's her very servant leadership definition, which is that leadership is not defined by the exercise of power, but the capacity to increase the sense of power among those led. The most essential work of a leader is to create more leaders, the empowering side. What kind of leader do you want to be out of all of those options? And this was what Ari Weinzweig and Paul Saginaw, when they started Zingerman's, they were really kind of natural servant leaders, but they didn't use that language at the time. Ari himself will talk about how he moved from dishwasher up to manager eventually because those steps kind of made sense, not because he had this like deep innate desire to be a great leader. The things that Ari and Paul did know when they created their business was that they wanted to be able to have a business with great food. In fact, a Reuben sandwich so big that when you bit into it, the Russian dressing would drip down your arms. But more so than that, they wanted to give exceptional service and provide a great place for folks to come and work in the business. And not only that, they wanted to think of their whole community. So they already had this mindset and very much a learning mindset. As they were trying to become better leaders, they did a lot of book reading. And Paul happened to find Servant Leadership, this book by Robert Greenleaf, originally published in 1977. Greenleaf was studying business management, learning very much like the wealth and power centric model. You can do a lot of things with that, but he was choosing instead to write this book to suggest something a little bit different. And what Robert Greenleaf said here is servant leadership holds that the primary purpose of an organization should be to create a positive impact on its employees and the community, rather than using money and soul as its sole motive. That was right in line with what Ari and Paul were thinking. Business is a tool to do good. Zingerman's and now all of the Zingerman's businesses are there in order to do a little bit of good in the world, bring food to people, bring joy and community, all of these things. And this servant leadership was the model that they wanted to live and teach at Zingerman's. Now, if you have worked with Zingerman's before, if you're familiar with Zingtrain, you know that we love to adapt things, especially when we can take something as strong and as inspiring as this servant leadership theory and then turn it into actionable recipes. And that's very much what Ari and Paul and many of the other leaders within Zingerman's did. They turned this book, highly recommend reading. There's lots of amazing research, other books as well. But here is it kind of distilled down in what can you actually do? What do you do day to day? What are the responsibilities of a servant leader? And here they are: to provide vision, give great service to staff, manage in an ethical manner, learn and teach, help staff succeed, and say thank you. And what these 6 elements, these 6 responsibilities do is they can lay out a job expectation for a manager. Hey, here's what you need to do, these 6 things. But there's another level here at Zingerman's, which is that all Zingerman staff, regardless of their role, are expected to be leaders and also live these 6 responsibilities. And so you don't necessarily have to be a manager, a people manager, in order to live these responsibilities. So wherever you are in your organization, consider this. This is Ari's definition to kind of highlight the difference between manager and leader. A manager is a job title, a position with specific responsibilities, clear expectations, and some range of control to be used in ways that benefit the organization. Becoming a manager means that someone else took action to hire you and gave you a sense of responsibilities in an area over which you have some authority. So we have a little authority in here. We have those specific responsibilities. It's pretty clear cut. But let's look at the other side. A leader, according to Ari, is not the same as a manager. Being a great leader requires no title, no particular experience. No one necessarily appoints a leader. Leaders don't necessarily have any particular set of responsibilities. There's no age requirement. There's no education requirement. Although leadership is often associated with power and hierarchy, the truth is it's not all that connected to either. I've come to believe the only thing that truly gets you into the ranks of leader is the decision to lead, combined with the ability to actually start leading. So now, all of you, I want you to consider that. What kind of leader do you want to be? Decide what kind of leader. And now we can get into, here's how you do it. Here are the skills that you need in order to be an effective leader. Diving into vision. Vision at Zingerman's, here's our definition, that it is a picture of what success looks like at a particular point in time in the future, described with enough richness of detail that we all know when we've arrived. Visions come in all sizes, and we write them in many ways as leaders. It could be a 10-year organizational vision. It could be a vision for this training shift, maybe for a high school student who just started out working at Zingerman's Deli. It could be a vision for a change, again, many sizes, a new system or some equipment that we just got that we're really excited about, a change in staffing, a new team member, or maybe there's a top leader in your organization who's retiring or moving away, and we want to be able to provide the vision of what things look like after that change has happened. The other way that we use visioning is when we're facing a problem. What if we're having really low sales and we've been missing a lot of our goals and this problem is staring us down? How can we get out of the weeds of what to do and, oh my goodness, how can we possibly get past this and focus on our end goals? What a vision does, what success looks like, is kind of the main point to get into as a leader. That it's a leader's job to communicate what we're going towards, big picture, and get us out of the in the moment hard things or in the moment changes. It's to inspire people that even when the work is hard, what is your perspective as a leader? Because you may be in more meetings, you may have more data or see different trends in your vision. How can you share that with others in a way that motivates or inspires them to get on board with the work? And I'm not saying that visioning is just like, oh, it's going to be fine, don't worry about it. Recognize what feels hard, recognize what the challenges are, and then communicate and invite others to share their ideas in order to do better work. In order to be effective, a vision, in addition to being inspiring, also does need to be strategically sound. So being aware, what is the data? What is the budget that might limit us, even though we want to reach for the sky? Maybe we don't get to the sky tomorrow. Maybe we get to the sky a few years from now. And then communication, often, well, in our organization, we write visions as a story, so it's actually very documented communication. But if it's not a really big picture communication, it can be something that just comes up in a check-in with someone. Maybe a staff person is saying, I'm feeling really stuck, and this part of my email is dreadful, and this customer is really hard to deal with. And our job as a leader is to kind of lift up and say, okay, but what are we working towards? When that customer came to you with all those problems, what will it look like on the other side when those problems are solved? And we have won over just the best regular customer due to all that work. Let's get past what's hard and into something really, really exciting. Our second responsibility for effective servant leadership is giving great service to staff. So why would we focus on great service so much? In fact, the very definition, servant leadership, is sharing that the main goal of an effective leader is to be in service to the organization and to all of the staff who come through it. That can sound like a lot of work. It is a lot of work. What is also a lot of work is the work of all of those frontline staff who are usually the folks who are directly supporting customers or directly building products, handling complaints, figuring out what needs to be done, figuring out all the hard options. So what we want to do is be able to support people in doing that work. And it's the manager's job, or not necessarily manager, could absolutely be a non-managing leader, to give others that really positive energy that they need to do that work. Coming in, and if you think of like those folks who just make your day, how can we make it a little easier for each other to do fantastic work to support our goals, our services, products, or customers? At Zingerman's, we actually have two very clear definitions of what service looks like, and it's important that we have those clear definitions. We have our 3 steps to giving great service and our 5 steps to effectively handling a complaint. These are written for customers, very customer facing. And what servant leadership tells us, Greenleaf, Ari and Paul, many others, is that in order to be really effective leaders, we need to do the same thing. Think of our staff, our team members, everyone who works in the organization, that they have the same high level of attention as our customers as well. And the other part of this too is that we use the same definitions, very, very close to the same definitions for customers and staff, because the more that leaders are using these 2 definitions, are modeling them, that is also showing staff what it looks like to give really, really great service. One of our Paulisms, a thing that Paul says, is that staff will never give better service to customers than they are receiving for their leaders. So let's define, and I invite you to define in your organization, what does great service look like so that everyone can give that to customers and that leaders can also give it to staff. Now, one thing that often comes up is, but what about this idea that customers are always right? Because staff people are not always right. And we also believe at Zingerman's that the customer is not always right. When the customer is wrong, we still want to treat them with dignity. And that translates very much over to I, as a manager or leader, when I have someone who says, like, this isn't working for me, I need more, we can now have a conversation of, I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong, but let's look at the needs of the staff person and the organization as a whole to make a better decision for how to fix something, how to move forward. So I'm not saying that you as a leader do everything for staff. I don't think that's even great service, but being able to support them in doing their work through these 2 definitions. Gets a little bit to our 5 steps to effectively handling complaints in particular, into what it looks like to manage in an ethical manner. And the first thing that we see here that's really important is do what you say you're going to do. Sounds easy, not always easy based on time, life happening. If you're not able to do what you say you're going to do, then we can go right back to those 5 steps to effectively handling a complaint and say, wow, I'm sorry. I was not able to meet these expectations that we set. I was not able to give you the schedule on time. And here's what I'm going to do in order to make it right. Again, modeling those 5 steps, modeling that communication, that even when we're not able to say, we did it, we have that communication tool. And then it also really helps other folks on the team to say, wow, now I can see when I make a mistake and I don't do what I said I would, this is the model for how to approach it. We also use that word ethical, which can sound really big. And so thinking about all decisions as ethical decisions, that ethical decisions aren't just the once in a lifetime, once in a year big decisions, but they happen every single day. I think of a really good one. We were working with an amazing restaurant and they had made 40 pounds of pimento cheese. And the person who'd been making it went to the leader and said, I just found a little piece of blue glove in this 40-pound of pimento cheese. What do I do? Can you see this as an ethical decision? Because the right thing to do is to throw away that entire contaminated 40 pounds. There might just be that little temptation to say, can we just take the little bit of glove out and continue to sell this product? Another Paulism is your values are not your values until they cost you money. And all those little decisions happen every single day of like, this is going to be expensive, but we're going to do it. Now, you don't have to be the only person who makes this decision. That leaders and decision makers is not totally equivalent. Instead, it's the leader's responsibility to make sure that the decision is made. The more we bring others in, the more experience that they get back. So thinking back to Mary Parker Follett, that the job of a leader is to create more leaders, bring them into that decision making. And then our last one here is to provide feedback. We have the belief that everyone comes to work here with something important to contribute. So we want to make sure that we're actually helping people to do their job really, really effectively by giving them feedback. If we are not giving feedback, then we believe that's actually an ethical decision and that's out of alignment with what we want to do. The right thing to do is say, here's what you're doing really well, and here are some things that you could improve. Robert Greenleaf puts it really well. While traditional leadership, oh, that's the wrong one, excuse me. That servant leadership always empathizes, always accepts the person, but sometimes refuses to accept some of the person's effort or performance as good enough. That I can see that this person is wanting to do a good job, they have things to contribute, and if I provide them feedback, then I can change some of their behaviors and bring them more in line to the work that we want to do. Learning and teaching. It is the job of an effective leader to be an active learner and teacher, essentially the opposite of an information hoarder. If knowledge is power, then our job as leaders, formal or informal, is to find ways to share that power. And we have very much a continuous improvement mindset, growth model mindset, whatever mindset you have. How can you inspire leaders to continue to learn and grow and then model for others how to learn and grow and continue to take our products and our services to the next level? Teaching is the highest level of learning. So not just learning for yourself, but when you can learn it in a way that you're going to teach, you're going to learn it in a completely different level. So think about any time that you've gone to teach someone something and you think to yourself, okay, this task is really easy. It's about probably like, I don't know, 3 steps. But then when you start to teach them, you think, okay, step number 1. Now that I think about it, before step number 1, there are 14 other things that you need to know or do in order to get step number 1. And all of a sudden, your task is a lot bigger than you thought. When you are actively learning and then actively teaching, you can dig into that communication and really share more effectively what the job is. And that takes a lot of work. So that's why we call it the highest level of learning, is because you really got to know things inside and out in order to be able to teach. This can all sound really great, but how do we make it a job expectation? There's actually the expectation that formal leaders at Zingerman spend 2 hours per week learning. That could be podcasts, that could be food tasting. We are a food business. It could be going to a seminar, any kind of professional development. And then the other side of that is that it's also an expectation to do 1 hour of formal teaching within the job, whether that's on shift or hosting a lunch and learn, internal classes, external classes to other folks. That is our expectation, to make sure like this is really serious. It's not just theoretical, but how can we actually put it into our jobs? The other side of that as a job expectation, the leader is also responsible for creating space for everyone on the team to learn and to share their learnings back with the team. So make a note to yourself, what are some ways that I'm learning and teaching? What are some ways that I'm inviting others in to that job so that they can continue to learn and grow as people and continue to develop our organization? It really helps thinking about how we help staff succeed. Learning and teaching ties very much to having clear performance expectations and, very importantly, training support. So the Gallup organization has done a lot of research that to find out what keeps people working in a job, what gets people excited to come to work or has them loyal to the work that they currently have. And the top number one answer is that people just want to know what the expectations are. They just want to know, when I come to work, what can I do in order to contribute and in order to feel like I showed up and was able to do my best. So whether you're a manager or a trainer or even a non-manager leader, finding ways to create those expectations, to document them, and then to communicate them for others. Ours, which you may have seen before, is the Zingerman's Training Compact. This is very much like big picture, any kind of training or helping staff succeed is first, as a trainer or leader, that we document those performance expectations and we provide the resources needed for the person to learn the skill. This could be standard operating procedures, all kinds of resources, but I think the other important resource is the time to practice and the time and practice of getting it wrong, letting people get it wrong in order to like really learn it and then be able to get it right from then on out. To also recognize performance, so we're sneaking feedback back in over here. How can we recognize and let someone know, here's what you're doing well, here's what you need to improve, and then rewarding that performance as well, finding ways, and it doesn't have to be monetary. One of the favorite ways that we have of rewarding people is that when they're in training, I follow them around. And when they're not in training, they're done with training, I don't have to follow them around and they feel a lot better about that. So it could be any definition of reward. But there's a whole other side. As a leader, I need to let people know that they also have responsibility for the effectiveness of their training, to ask questions, to not say, I couldn't do it, no one ever told me, and instead to say, hey, I see that the floor needs to be mopped. I see that this customer complaint has not been handled. I see that this system is broken. Can someone train me on doing that work? Can someone give me that skill and the time to practice so that I can accomplish it? The last part, though, of helping staff succeed is coming in very servant leadership mindset with positive beliefs. Really, truly believing that folks want to be able to contribute. They just need those clear tools in order to be able to do that. And then I will add to having positive beliefs about your products as well, and being able to tie back to vision a little bit and say, hey, this product is going to be amazing. Let's get behind it. Let's improve it. Having those positive beliefs are much more likely to lead to positive outcomes. Negative beliefs tend to lead to negative outcomes. So it's also being aware, what are the beliefs that I hold in my work and how am I as a leader kind of infusing them or passing them along into everyone around me. Speaking of positive beliefs, this last one can be really the fun one. How do we say thank you? How do we appreciate people for coming to work? And we want our thank yous to be really, really intentional. First of all, specific and timely. So what has this person done to help create success for the organization? I think this point too, when we can be specific and timely with our thank yous, we can also create that framework that people who, like the staff people who are on maybe the team that I am managing, they're not doing the work for me. They're doing the work for each other. They're doing the work for the organization. So how can I be really specific in my thank yous that can let someone know, hey, because you came in early, because you stayed late, yes, you were rewarded with some overtime, but look at the positive effect that we were able to have on these products. Or because you supported the brand new person, look how much stronger our team is. It's that opportunity to let people know your hard work is paying off. That 4-to-1 ratio of positive to constructive complaints, there was some cool research done about how really effective working relationships are built off of 4 positive feedbacks or thank yous to 1 constructive. If you go higher, a 7-to-1, 7 positive to 1 constructive is a loving relationship. But if you get too high, maybe 12-to-1 is now considered insincere. So this is a thing that you could actually, again, write on your to-do list. Check in. How many people are you appreciating and saying thank you per every constructive piece of feedback that you have? How can you build stronger working relationships with that little bit of data? And then make sure when you are thanking people that you're thanking them how they would like to be thanked. Because if someone loves to be celebrated in a meeting with treats, do that. But if someone would like to crawl under the table if you try to celebrate them in a meeting in any kind of way, maybe just write a note to yourself to give them a little thank you note so they don't have to suffer public attention. If you want to know, how do I know how people want to be thanked? Go right back to those 3 steps to giving great service, figure out what the person wants, and ask them. You can just ask them, how do you like to be appreciated? At Zingerman's, we actually have a document of everyone's favorite snacks so that we can give people their favorite snacks as a thank you. So think about that. Is this easy for you? How can you not only be really appreciative of others, but how can you, again, create space for everyone in your organization or on your team to appreciate each other? Paul will say that if we treat folks like volunteers who just happen to get paid, then that is a really strong organization. And you can think about it this way. If the leader doesn't show up to work on a shift, the work will probably get done. But if only the leader shows up to work, then it's going to be a way lower likelihood of the work getting done. So we definitely want to appreciate everyone who's coming to work today and showing them all that they're contributing. Bonus points here. If you actually take a little moment and write down some appreciations that you'd like to share by the end of today. So let's look at these 6 responsibilities in one set, because in a PowerPoint or in a slide like this, they look very linear, but really they aren't linear. They're not necessarily divided. You've already heard me say, they often happen at the same time. So when someone says like, hey, you didn't really mention delegating necessarily, I think delegating is one of those things that really ties a bunch of them together, because in delegating, I want to make sure that I'm giving really great service to staff, that I am delegating them something that they will be able to accomplish and do really, really well. I also want to manage in that ethical manner, thinking about ethical decisions. Folks need that training and support in order to make the decisions well. And now I'm talking about training, so you can see number 4 there, learn and teach. We're often going to blend all of these together and then perhaps add a vision. So if I'm asking Katie, hey, Katie, here's a decision that we need to make, and I think you would be the person to make it, then I want to share that big picture. Here's what we're going towards. I want to actually appreciate all of her ideas, share those little decisions, all of the data, so that I can kind of like give this whole project as something that's empowering, as opposed to, hey, I'd like this off my plate. Can you just do this for me? Would be the opposite of that. Training is another thing too. We want to think about helping staff succeed in documenting the expectations, but also giving great service. How can I make sure that the way that I'm training someone is based on their learning style, not how I want to teach? And that might involve a lot of asking questions or handling complaints. When someone says, you keep training me this way, I think very specifically of someone I kept training in person how to brew coffee. And finally she said, this is not working. I learn by reading. Can you document the same information so I can read it and learn it best? Great. Use those 5 steps. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for letting me know. Let's do it. Let's get that documentation going. So in other words, we're going to blend these together in all of our activities. I think it's just really useful to know that they're here. And when those questions come up of, man, I don't know if I'm being an effective leader, we can check in. Well, did I provide vision? Did I share with people what our big goals are so that they contribute to the work? Am I giving them great service? Checking in, apologizing when I need to, going the extra mile and doing little bonus things that can make them feel really, really good about their work. Managing in that ethical manner and really talking through ethical decisions, continuing to learn and teach and help staff succeed with expectations and a clear understanding of what we're going for, and then continually saying thank you. And when you say thank you, it's always fun too to receive those thank yous back. I know there are many questions in here, and so I'm looking forward to answering some of your specific questions.
That's when I pop back on. Hi, everyone. Arianna, you are such a delight to to watch and listen to. It really took us on I felt like this really great journey, like within yourself and about these concepts in our organization. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of questions. I'm gonna sort of start with the questions that are more about like individual practice of servant leadership, and then go into servant leadership with a larger team and for others. This might be, yeah, we'll do my best here. So first question, do you have any tips on how to maintain a servant leadership mindset when your organizational leadership doesn't follow those principles?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple of things that come to mind because it depends on the size of your organization. Are you one department in a very large organization where that's okay? Set your own culture. You have some space to set that culture and really like say, hey, we're going to do it differently in this department, even though we might inherit big goals from the big organization. How can we within that provide that vision and give great service to each other? I think that can be harder in a really small organization. And I mean, you can prove me wrong all you want, but when you really feel like you're the only one who's living this servant leadership, that's really hard. We think of burnout as not doing too much work, but burnout is when you are not, your work is not aligned with your values. And so if you are working within an organization that does not have those values, it can be really, really hard. So I do want you to listen to yourself too. And you're thinking like, man, this sounds really, really good. I'm not able to do it. I've been struggling for years. Consider that. Is there another organization where you could really bloom and blossom and grow? The other thing that I think about too is that is servant leadership not used in your organization because no one knows how to do it? Maybe like a bunch of people read the books or a couple articles, but haven't made that jump to how to do it, in which case communicating what these 6 responsibilities are, maybe adapting them and sharing them. We actually have a whole other system for bottom line change, creating an effective change and saying, hey, I'm really inspired by this. Can us group of core leaders get together and think about how can we learn more and how can we take action to actually live this and make it part of our job descriptions? So those are just a couple of things to think about.
Thank you. Another question, more internal, is how do you practice servant leadership while still maintaining your authority? In particular, it's a struggle for me to balance serving staff along with needing my staff to be accountable as our team grows.
Yes. One of the ways that I really like to think about this is making sure that it's in folks' job descriptions so that when I go in with into a conversation, maybe about feedback, it's not about you versus me. It's not like you as a staff person, me as a leader having a conversation where I feel like I need to do a lot of things, but how can we instead look at the problem or look at the expectations? And let's go back to the job expectations and see like, wow, like thinking big picture training compact, it's your responsibility to make sure that your learning is really effective for you. So let's have a conversation there. Or, hey, it looks like the expectation is that you do respond to all customer emails within 48 hours. What are some ways that are getting in the way of that? It's starting a conversation. As the leader, it's not my job to fix the problem for the staff member, but instead it's that both of us come together, we look at what's good for the organization, and then we start to have a conversation. We have some resources on stewardship too, and sometimes there's not an easy answer, and we're not going to answer it by the end of a single meeting. Maybe we need to have meetings over the course of a couple of weeks where we keep coming back to the table and keep addressing those different, whatever those challenges is. But I think servant leadership can often be interpreted that I just need to make it right for the staff person, just like I would for a customer. Let me just do a lot of extra work and just fix it. But instead, it really is shifting that to how can I give great service by instead like coming back to the table to have this conversation.
Thank you. So there are a lot of questions, I think, in the pre-survey and then now here, is people are curious, how do we start to build our own culture of servant leadership in an organization? How do you teach it to others? And how do we help people live it every day?
I'm going to sneak in some other content here and say that we actually have 5 elements to building a culture of anything, any organizational culture. And what it takes to do that is to first commit to teaching. When you commit to teaching, it's easier to put on your to-do list. So put that in, commit to having a meeting, commit to doing learning. Then we want to clearly define what that looks like. So, okay, in our organization, what does effective servant leadership or leadership look like? Then we live it, modeling it for others, taking those actions, holding ourselves accountable to live our new definition. We find ways to measure and track. That can be a little bit tricky if you're thinking like, I don't know, is there a number associated with leadership? But there might be. How are you documenting more clear performance expectations? Writing standard operating procedures, creating more training resources. Those are all things that you could track. You could also track, are we appreciating each other enough? Let's set a goal that at the end of every meeting, we're going to do appreciations, and then we'll track to make sure that those actually happen. So finding ways to measure, and then reward. How can we reward each other as leaders for living these definitions? And now we might go back to teach and define, because as we learn more, we might want to shift our definition. We might want to do a little bit of reteaching. It can be hard. It's a lot of work. Shifting a culture takes about 2 years at least. There's data to support this, but also at Zingerman's, we experience it a lot. But having those 5 elements can really help. And then if you have, for all of these, if you want more details, like we will be standing by, would be happy to dive in deeper. But I love that question though. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it gets to the heart of this too, in a way. It's okay, I guess this is in line with I've transitioned to the team and servant leadership for the team. So there are a couple of people here who work with students. I believe college age students, and they have a really short time period that they get to work with these folks. And so there's not really training. So is there a way to sort of create and instill these things quickly? Or just like what might be a way to like help college age kids who are very busy and, they're also in college, get some of this when they're on committees or working in centers?
Yeah, I think having specific resources, having specific expectations, like when someone comes on to a committee, like actually giving them like, here are the expectations that I have of you. But I think the other part too is connecting and finding out like what is their vision for being a better leader? Like what kind of leader do they want to be? Because once someone has in their mind thinking, That's a great question. I don't know. And you kind of plant that idea. Let them lead the asking. How can I do this better? When I was in college, I had the opportunity to hire people. So I was working in alumni relations at my university, and the folks around me were really, really good at supporting me and saying, okay, here are the expectations that we have for you as a hiring person. And what we're going to do is be there the whole time for you as you figure it out. But they did give me like, here's the list of things that you need to do. And then while you don't have to teach them necessarily the 6 responsibilities of effective servant leadership, write those into that to-do list of like, hey, you need to be able to communicate the goals to the team. You need to be able to say thank you. Any of those where you can see like, how can I translate these responsibilities into like a little to-do action item that I can expect. I think my personal belief is that college students are very familiar with homework. So what's a way that you can teach like these servant leadership ideas and turn them into a little bit of homework? That's a
Thank
great
you.
question.
Yeah, it is. It's yeah, I think it helps a couple different people in here. So that's great. Um, okay. So what happens when you're looking to re-inspire people who have possibly lost their edge or lost their passion due to just an unfavorable circumstance in the workplace?
Yeah. I think outside of those 6 responsibilities, I think it's really diving down to the how can I give this person um great service and support them. And a lot of times that's just having hard conversations and kind of switching. In this case, it would be switching from like leadership in general to, I'm thinking, performance management. Like maybe this person isn't meeting their expectations, and putting on my performance management hat specifically, we're going to first find out like, what is the root cause? Is there a system that's not working? Did this person not receive the training that they need? Or have we not been holding them accountable? And we need to kind of like re-norm or revisit how this work is done. And then some of the ways that we reconnect people is maybe having them buddy up on a project with someone else so that they have an opportunity to kind of like work on things together. What are some others that we do? I'll have them write a vision for themselves, like, hey, what do you want to be doing here? When I was working at the deli, my manager did come to me because, full disclosure, when I started at the deli, I said, I want to be working here for about 3 months. And my manager said, that's fine. We'll help you have a very successful 3 months. But almost 2 years in, my manager came back to me and said, hey, remember how you said you're only be for 3 months? You're still here. What are you doing? Do you want to be more intentional about that? And so I took a visioning class, and I found that hugely motivating and inspiring to myself to have the time to think about, what do I want? And it was kind of like that kick in the pants that I needed of, okay, it's time to continue learning to grow. It's time to look for another position that will challenge me so that I can also give back to the organization. So a lot of times it's having that. Other times though, like, how can we give that person a break? Honestly, like if they could actually like use their PT or their paid time off or whatever vacation that they haven't been using, can we encourage them to like put work done and come back to it? There is no perfect answer. I think it's just having that conversation with folks and seeing what resources that we can provide.
Everyone has such great questions. I'm just like seeing them come in and organize them as best I can. There's a follow-up, I believe, to what you had just asked, and that is how to reignite this trait or aspect to tenured employees. So
Yeah,
does that
I
make
think
sense?
I think I'm going to say visioning. But let me know later if I'm not actually answering your question. Someone who's been here for a really long time, and maybe they're doing just fine at the job, but we really believe that they can learn and grow. Ask them, have them imagine like a year from now, what are you doing? What have you learned? How have you continued to contribute and do a really great job? Because maybe they need to do a little professional development. Um, Maybe they want to learn a new skill or become a leader. They could become a change leader. Inviting them to think about like, what do they love about the job, reconnect with the work. I think visioning is a tool for doing that. And so when we write personal visions, it's actually picking a particular point in time, like a year from now. What have I done that makes me feel really, really successful? What are images of success? At Zingtrain and actually many others in the organization, it's actually part of our performance reviews to write a 1 or 2 year vision. And so when we sit down with our managing partner, we actually share that. It can have some personal stuff in it, but it really, the expectation is that it's a work vision. In the next year, here's what I'm really excited to accomplish. Here's where I'm excited to learn and grow. That can be fabulous for developing new ideas, innovating, all of those things. So yeah, highly encourage looking more into visioning or just asking, like, what does success look like to you?
Yeah, that's great. It's nice to sort of think about visioning as it can be something that you already have inside you that you're really inspired to put out, but it can also be, I'm feeling stuck or like, I don't really know what's going on next. And that's a tool for that emotion as
Yeah,
well.
we often don't get the chance to ask ourselves, like, what do I want? And so it can be really lovely to lead someone to that conversation of like, hey, what do you want? What that's part of the expectations, like, hey, when you come to work, how do you want to feel like you've done your best?
Yeah. Um, how do you know as a leader when your expectations are too high of your staff? Like, or how do you know when someone is truly unable to perform their role? What's that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I know of a leader, a friend has a leader who will say like, my job is to challenge you. And if you find yourself challenging people without the support structure in line to actually do the work, I think that's taking it too far. I think that training compact can also help go back and forth. Like if I set the expectations for someone, but I don't give them the resources, the time they need to learn the skill. If I don't provide feedback or appreciate them, then I need to go back to my side of the training compact. And then it's also saying like, hey, I'm going to hold you to these expectations. Now, your job on the other side of things, your side of the training compact is to take responsibility. And the responsibility is not just to do the work, it's to either do the work or renegotiate and come back to the table and say, I need more resources. I need clearer expectations. The option that is not there is just not doing the work. So I think that's something that we sometimes need to communicate to people is like your options are like do the work or share your great ideas so we can make things better. But if someone's just not doing the work, that's a different that's more of a solving a performance problem. I think it's totally reasonable as a leader to say like, hey, you were hired to do this job. Here's the list of things on your job and you're not doing them. That's a problem. That's not a like me versus you. I like you versus I don't like you. That's like can be a very objective of like you're not doing the job. So I would encourage you to think about that. Like when you have someone it's kind of going back and thinking, have I given them the systems that they need, the resources, the training in order to support what they would. Katie, I think I walked off that question though a little bit. What was the second part?
It was a reframing of if like someone really isn't able to meet the expectations of you, how do you know that and how do you navigate
Yeah.
like, yeah.
And it could be, again, putting on the people management, performance management. It could be coming up with a performance improvement plan, like, hey, here are the things that I specifically need you to, or behaviors I need you to change. And then eventually, really is rough. But if we're going to give great service to every individual on the team and to the team and to the organization, if someone is coming to work and not doing their job and making it harder for everyone else to do their job, it's not good service to keep them here. It's good service to set them free to work somewhere else where they will be able to contribute. So, servant leadership is not like making room for everyone to work here in the organization. It's for those who are willing to do the job and the work, we want to give them amazing service. And for those who would be a better fit somewhere else, letting them free. That's my fancy phrase for like firing them or letting them quit. It's like that is also part of the option. Like that is an option.
Yeah. And that's a question that someone had also, like, can you be a good servant leader and let someone go? And
Yes.
yes.
Yes. And
The
here's
answer is
one way
yes.
to do it is to say, this isn't working, whatever, a nice way of you're not doing your job. If you want to come back, here are some things, here's some feedback, here's some things to improve, because that has happened many times in our organization. They work here, it's not working, they go and work where else, and a couple of years later, they come back and say, I'm ready. I see things a different way. I have new experiences, and now I'm excited to come back and live servant leadership or follow that training compact or use those annoying SOPs to do all of these tasks. Yes, that can be really great service as well.
Okay. Switching over to appreciations. Someone tried appreciations in their organization, but then there was someone there that felt left out. So how do you ensure that everyone is appreciated at each meeting, or everyone feels some sense of equality in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first answer, you could like be really systematic about it. I'm a systematic person and I will forget to appreciate people. And so I will create a list of like, man, I feel like I haven't appreciated this person. I should check in. Like, do some tracking on your own. Remember that building a culture, measuring, tracking, right? Make yourself a little system. But here's another thing too, is are you thinking of the appreciations as only coming from you? You aren't seeing all of the work of all the people on your team. So instead, how can you also create space for people to appreciate each other? So at the end of our weekly meetings, it's not just the leader sharing the appreciations, it is all of us appreciating each other as well. And again, teaching people like specific and timely and what is a good appreciation. So someone might need a little bit of feedback, but I think putting that out there. The other thing too is someone felt left out. Was that because you didn't appreciate them or because you didn't appreciate them in the way that they wanted to be appreciated? Because if you really like just little side appreciations and this person loves being like put up on a stage with like balloons to appreciate them, have a conversation. Put it into that 5 steps to handling complaint scenario of like, wow, I'm really sorry. How do you like to be appreciated? And let's see if we can do something a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay. We have a couple minutes. I have one more question for you that I think you can answer, and then I'll wrap things up. Can you re-explain the 4-to-1 ratio that you were talking about? I think,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, happily. So that a really effective working relationship has 4 parts, compliments or thank yous. So positive reinforcement or comments to 1 part constructive. So I am saying it's not like the feedback sandwich. I don't have to say 4 things. I don't have to say 5 things every single time, but over the course of like a week or a month, you could track this. Am I generally giving people about 4 pieces of positive feedback for each constructive feedback, and those little thank yous that are specific and timely and behaviorally based, they can actually count towards that 4. And I think that hopefully that answers your question. It's like not that you have to do like talk to people 5 times at once, but like you can do a quick like, oh, I see that you're bringing the wrong information to a customer really quick, but then making sure that it's also balanced. Patty McGraw, she was our amazing director of our Department for People or HR. She would say that feedback's like a little emotional piggy bank, that we don't want to only make withdrawals. Instead, we want to be able to like add in those little positive touches so that when constructive feedback needs to happen, an improvement or behavior needs to change, there's like a little bit of room in there in our emotional piggy bank.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Thank you. Okay, and thank you everybody who was here. Thank you for spending this hour with us and being so like interested and engaged and asking vulnerable questions, and really wanting to figure this thing out for yourselves. I want to thank you, Arianna, so much for sharing yourself and your wisdom with us today, and for Mara for rocking out the chat. We always love to hear what you've thought of today's webinar. We're very big on feedback. And if you're tight on time, we have a quick poll that you can rate your experience from 0 to 10. If you have a bit more time, we do have a survey, and it also allows you to give us some more feedback and suggestions for future webinars. And so Mara will drop that in the chat, please, and thank you. We will be sending out the recording of today's webinar, just as a reminder, and also some resources specifically about constructive, courageous conversations. I know there was a lot of questions about that we didn't get to answer. So please look out for those. They will be in your inbox by Monday at the latest. And again, we've got more webinars online, and we will see you again in the near future for more live stuff as well. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks very much.
Thanks all.